All right, guys. So this is lesson 5.4, and here we go. So these first three problems right here are actually review. They're critical numbers type 1. The reason you can tell that is because, like, if you look at question 1a, if you multiplied that out, you'd have an x to the third, and you have an inequality, so it's critical numbers type 1. So step 1, get a 0, done. Step number 2, factor, done. Step number 3, list your critical numbers. So your critical numbers are x equals 1, -2, +3. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my number line. -2 is over here, 1 is right there, and 3 is right there. I have no equal sign, so it's going to be open. I don't have any even exponents, so I know my signs are going to alternate. Okay, if 0 was a critical number, I couldn't test it, but it's not. So I'm going to test 0. You can test whatever you want. If I test 0, I'm testing that region right there. So if you go 0, store, enter, then you put the equation in, parenthesis, membar, enter, -1, close it, parenthesis, membar, enter, +2, close it, parenthesis, membar, enter, -3, close it, -3, close it, enter, I get a +6. So I know my signs are going to alternate, so if that's a positive, then it must be negative, positive, negative, positive. Those signs have to be there, okay? And I'm looking for where it's greater than 0, which is positive. So it's here and here. The directions say interval notation, so the answer is -2 to +1, both with parentheses, union 3 to infinity. Everything's closed with a parenthesis, and I'm done. Okay. Question B, step 1, get your 0, done. Step 2, factor. So I can take out an x squared. When I do, I'm left with x squared -4, and then x squared -4 factors 2x plus 2 times x minus 2. Okay. So biggest exponent is a 4. So I should have 4 critical numbers. This right here gives me x equals 0. That gives me a -2. That gives me a +2. I only have 3 critical numbers because this guy is a critical number twice. Okay, just so you know. So -2 is over here, 0 is over here, 2 is over there. I have closed circles because I have an equal sign. I cannot test 0 because 0 is a critical number. So I'm just going to test 1. If I test 1, I'm testing that region right there. So if you go 1, store, enter, I'm going to put it into the original before it's factored. I think that's the easiest place. So hit membar, enter, raise it to the 4th, -4, membar, enter, x squared, hit enter, and I get a negative. Now, my signs may be funny, and that is because I've got a squared. So I'm actually going to test each region. This takes like another, 20 seconds. So the left region, -3, store, enter, up, enter, and I get a positive. The next region, -1, store, enter, up, enter, and I get a negative. The right side, 3, store, enter, up, enter, and I get a positive. I'm looking for the negatives, which is the center region, here and here. Now, this does not make sense. From a -2 to a 0 with a bracket, union from a 0 to a 2 with a bracket. You guys, you don't even have to talk about the 0 because it touches the 0. So why would you stop and say from -2 to 0, including 0, from 0 to 2, including the 0? You don't even have to talk about the 0. So it's just from -2 to a +2, both close with a bracket, and you're done. Okay, question C. Step 1, set it equal to 0. So you bring your 4x over. Step number 2, less than 0. Step number 2, factor, so take out an x, and you're left with x to the second plus 4x plus 4. Then you factor, so it goes to x and x. Signs are the same, they're both positive. 2 and 2 multiply to give me 2 and add to give me 4. Next step is critical numbers. The x out in front gives you a 0. The +2 gives you a -2. So guys, that line right there is the same thing as x plus 2 squared. So there might be funny stuff with my numbers, my signs. So I have to test all the regions, which is really not that big of a deal. No equal sign, circles are open. Left region, -3. The place I always put it is right there, and I always store it. So if you go -3, store, enter, and then go memvar, enter, raise it to the third, plus 4, memvar, enter, x squared, plus 4, memvar, enter, enter, and I get a negative. Middle region, -1, store, enter, up, enter, I got a negative. To the right, 1, store, enter, up, enter, I got a positive. They want less than 0, which is negative, so it's here and here. Now, it does not make sense to say negative infinity to 0 with a parenthesis because it does not include the 2. Here, you didn't have to split it apart because it did include the 0. Here it does not include the -2, so you have to state that. So it's negative infinity to -2 with the parenthesis, union, -2 to 0, everything's closed with parentheses, and I'm done. Okay? All right, so here's the new stuff. So this, what I want you to write right here, is critical numbers type 2. So the reason I still call it critical numbers type 2 is because the steps are almost the same. There's like 2 steps in there that are different than critical numbers type 1. And so anyway, that's why I call it that. So what makes it a critical numbers type 2? 2 things. So look at question A. Do you see how you have a fraction with an x on the bottom? That's what we have to have. So go fraction with an x on the bottom. And the other thing you need is an inequality. So the greater than, less than business. So if you look at A, it's got it. Look at B. Fraction with an x on the bottom, inequality. So you have to recognize it's a critical numbers type 2. So look at step 1. Get a 0 on the right. Same step as the critical numbers type 1. This right here, step number 2, is new. Get a common denominator. Step 3, factor. That's the same as type 1. List your critical numbers. It's the same as type 1. Domain restrictions is new. And if you look through, everything else is the same. See where it says table of values? Cross that out and just put test regions. My students used to have to do a table of values, but they don't anymore. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do example 2, and we're going to go slowly, okay? Step 1, get a 0 on the right. Done. Step number 2, get a common denominator. So you'll have this step if over on the left-hand side, you now have 2 separate fractions that you need to pull together. But that is not the case on this because it's just a single fraction over there. So then the next step is to list your critical numbers, or maybe it says factor. Yeah, factor, but there's no factoring on the top or the bottom. So now we're going to list our critical numbers, and you do that by setting the top equal to 0, you get a 1, bottom equal to 0, you get a -2. So now I'm going to go to this number line. The -2 is over here, the positive 1 is over here. Now I skipped the restrictions. So what's the domain on that left side? Well, it's x cannot be -2. So then I always ask my students, are my circles open or are they closed? Some people say open, some people say closed, and they're actually both correct. Because you see how x can't be a -2? So it's going to be an open circle. But since I have an equal sign, it's really supposed to be closed over here on the 1, like that. Nothing is squared, the top nor the bottom, so all I have to do is just test one region. Now you can totally do the storing thing, but guys, look how easy this is. 0's in that region. If I let x be a 0 right here, this goes away and this goes away. A -1 over +2 is a negative. So I know that's negative. I also know my signs are going to alternate, so it's going to be plus minus plus. Less than 0 means negative. That would be here. So my answer in interval form is -2 to a +1, close with a bracket, done. Okay, question B. Step 1, get a 0, get a 0 on the right, done. Step number 2, get a common denominator. I don't have two separate fractions that I need to pull together, so that's not a thing. The next thing is to factor. So I'm going to factor the top, so it goes to an x and an x. The 2 goes to a 2 and a 1. Signs are different because it's the negative. Factor the bottom, it goes to x and x. Signs are the same, they're both negative. 3 and 1 multiply to give me 3 and add to give me 4, and I have less than or equal to 0. Okay, the next step is to list your critical numbers. So from the top, I have x equals -1 and +2. From the bottom, I have +1 and +3. Now, I told you guys I would write those separately from now on, so you don't have to keep straight. So I'm going to go x equals -1, x equals +2, x equals +1, x equals +3. That is not necessary, but I'm going to do it so we don't have to keep track of which ones we have to write separately and which ones we don't. Okay, so -1 is over here. +1 is right here. And then close to the +1 is a 2, close to the 2 is a 3. So do you see how this is a unit of 1 and this is a unit of 2? So I've written that further away. So make sure you're kind of do that a little bit. Okay, restrictions, by the way, x cannot be 1, x cannot be 3. So my circles are going to be open on the 1 and the 3, but since I have an equal sign, they're going to be closed on the other ones. Okay, you guys look at the exponents. This is big. Some people don't really get this or rely on this, and then they mess up on the signs. But the signs are so easy because look, 1, 1, 1, 1. Nothing's squared or bigger. So if they're all ones, it's going to be so straightforward. The place I definitely recommend you plug it in is right there. So once you have a 0 and a common denominator, but before you factor, I think is the easiest place to put it. So let's test. You can test a 0, it doesn't matter. If you test a 0, you're putting it here. And if I tested a 0, I don't even need my calculator. Guys, look, those all go away. Negative over positive is a negative. I know my signs are going to alternate because I don't have anything squared or higher. So I know it's going to be positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Those signs must be there. Less than 0 means negative. So negative here, and that's it. So my final answer is -1 with a bracket to 1 with a parenthesis, union 2 with a bracket to 3 with a parenthesis, and I'm done. Okay, all right, they're going to start getting a little more difficult. This one's not, though. Step number 1, get a 0 on the right, done. Step number 2, get a common denominator. It's not necessary because I don't have two fractions over there to pull together. Step number 3 is to factor. Well, the top is already factored. The bottom factors to x plus 3 times x minus 3. So the next step is critical numbers. From the top, you get x equals -2. From the bottom, you get x equals -3, and you also get x equals +3. You guys, the restrictions are 3 and -3, which would make those circles open. But the circles are all going to be open anyway because I don't have an equal sign. So you can totally write the restrictions, but it's not going to change anything because the restrictions make them open. They're open anyway. So I'm not even going to worry about it. -3 is over here. -2 is over here. +3 is quite a ways away. Okay, so circles all open because there's no equal sign. Now I do have a squared, which means the signs might be funny. They may not alternate. Okay, so the place I'm going to put it in is here. Let's test the left. So let's try -4. So everybody go -4, store, enter. Put in the green, parenthesis, membar, enter, +2, close it, x squared, divided by parenthesis, membar, enter, x squared, -9, close it, enter, and I get a positive. So guys, if you don't know how to put that green highlighted equation in your calculator, if you don't understand that you don't need parentheses around the top, and you do around the bottom, you're literally going to miss it from here on out. So the calculator is so important. The reason you don't need parentheses around the top is because that's all one thing. It's like a monomial up there. If you did put parentheses, it would be fine. But if you omit the parentheses on the bottom, you're going to miss it. So be careful. Okay, so this was a positive. In between a -2 and a -3, -2.5. So everybody go -2.5, store, enter, up, enter, and I get a negative. Next region, I'll do a 0. 0, store, enter, up, enter. I got a negative. To the right, 4, store, enter, up, enter, and I got a positive. Okay, I'm looking for greater than 0, which is positive. So that would be here and here. Now, what about the middle? Well, this region right here is not included because it's negative. This region is not included because it's negative. And this too is not included because it's open. So we don't have to worry about any of that. So it's just going to be -infinity to -3 with a parenthesis, union 3 to infinity, and that's it. Okay? Some people ask me, well, what if the 2 was closed? What if the whole thing looked exactly the same, but the 2 was closed? Just so you guys know, you don't have to write this down. It'd be -infinity to -3 with a parenthesis, union -2 with a bracket to -2 with a bracket, union 3 with a parenthesis to infinity. Okay? And you guys know that's not the case, but that's how you would do it. All right, question D. I do think that these problems will show up both on your midterm and your final. And I think they're going to look like D or more difficult. Okay, so here we go with D nice and slowly. Okay, step 1, get a 0. So you're going to pull the stuff on the right over to the left, and it's going to become a 0. Step number 2, get a common denominator. This question does have a step 2. I feel like some of you struggle with fractions, and you have to be able to pull those together correctly, or everything's going to be lost from here on out, guys. So if I need a common denominator, it's so easy, guys. Look, I just pull those two denominators together, and then I look at it. So look at this guy right here. He has the 3x minus 2, but he's missing the x plus 3. So I have to multiply top and bottom by x plus 3. Then I distribute, and I get 2x plus 6. Do this next guy. He's got the x plus 3. He's missing the 3x minus 2. Here's the big place people make mistakes. This negative is getting distributed. So guys, you're taking a negative and distributing it to 3x minus 2. That's going to give you a negative 3x plus 2. Some of you are leaving this as two separate fractions. When you get your common denominator, do not do that. Pull it all under 1. Okay? So when I simplify this, I get negative x plus 8 over 3x minus 2 times x plus 3 greater than or equal to 0. Next step, critical numbers. People will look at the top and they say that that gives me a critical number of x equals negative 8, and that is wrong. Okay? It's not a negative 8. It's a positive 8. Here's why it's a positive 8. Guys, look. If you take negative x plus 8 and set it equal to 0, the x comes over and becomes a positive, and you get x equals 8. So just be careful with that. Set the bottom equal to 0. You get a 2/3, and the next one is a negative 3. Number line. Smallest number is a negative 3. Pretty close to that is 2/3. Far away, positive 8. Restrictions. X cannot be 2/3 and x cannot be negative 3. So this is going to be an open circle and an open circle. The 8 will be a closed circle. This negative x plus 8 is raised to the first, as is that, so I know my signs are going to alternate. I'm going to test a 0, and I'm going to test it right there, okay? So where's the best place to put it in? I would put it in right here. Now, no, not there. I lied. I would put it in right here, the green. and it is just a little tricky. So the thing that's tricky, if you guys would look up, you do need the parentheses around the top, but you also need parentheses around the entire denominator. So it's just a little tricky to put it in when it's factored. That's why I always say like right before you factor. Okay, so everybody go, 0, store, enter. Parenthesis, negative, memvar, enter, plus 8, close it, divided by, parenthesis, 3, memvar, enter, minus 2, close it, parenthesis, memvar, enter, plus 3, close it, enter, and I get a negative. I know my signs are alternating, so it's plus, minus, like that. The regions I need to shade are the ones that are greater than 0, which is positive. So this region and this region. So my answer in interval form is negative infinity to negative 3 with a parenthesis, union 2/3 with a parenthesis to 8 with a bracket, and I'm done. So guys, this lesson is highly tested. You know, you've just got to know how to do it. Just get those steps memorized, really, is what you need to do. All right, let's do question E. Let's see how much we have left here. Okay, let's do question E. Step 1, I can tell it's a critical numbers type 2, by the way, because I have a fraction with an x on the bottom and an inequality. So step 1, get a 0 on the right-hand side. You guys, your 0 should always be on the right-hand side. Okay, so just pull your 4 over. This is like an x over 1. This is like a negative 4 over 1. The next step is common denominator. 1 fraction bar, not 3 separate bars. Okay, look at this guy right here. I'm missing the x. So 1 times x is x. So x times x is x squared. This guy right here, I'm not missing the x. So I'm just going to go plus 3. This guy right here is missing the x. So I go negative 4 times x, negative 4x. Now, I certainly hope you look at that and can tell that the top is weird, like it's in the wrong order. So all you have to do is go x to the second minus 4x plus 3 over x is less than or equal to 0. So now step 2 is done. I've got my common denominator. Step 3 is to factor. So it's going to go to x and x. Signs are the same. They're both negative. 3 and 1 multiply to give me 3 and add to give me 4. And that's all over x. Next step is critical numbers. So my critical numbers are x equals 1, x equals 3, x equals 0. Restrictions, x cannot be 0. Go to your number line. The 0's on the left. Right next to it is a 1. A little further away is a 3. The 1 is open, the 0 is open. The 1 and the 3 are both closed. All my exponents are 1, so I know my signs are going to alternate. I cannot test I cannot test 0 because 0 is a critical number. So I have to test something else. Totally doesn't matter. I know my signs are going to alternate. How about if we just test a negative 1, and I'm going to store a negative 1 into here. Since the top is a trinomial, I have to put parentheses like that. Okay, so everybody go white negative button, 1, store, enter. Parenthesis, memvar, enter, x squared, minus 4, memvar, enter, plus 3, close it, divided by memvar, enter, and I get a negative 8. So this region's a negative. I know they're going to alternate. Please understand the alternating thing. It'll save you. People miss the signs up, and then they miss, a ton of points. Less than means negative. So negative means here and here. So my final answer is negative infinity to 0 with a parenthesis, union 1 with a bracket to 3 with a bracket, and I'm done. That's it. Okay, question 3. A rocket is shot into a body of water. The height of the rocket in feet with respect to time is given by this equation. Find the time when the rocket is in the water. Okay, so remember when you have a word problem, I always want you to write x equals y equals. So h of t is the y, and that stands for the height, and that would be in feet. the x is represented by a t, and if you read, that's time in seconds. Find the time when the rocket is in the water. Okay, so it's shot into the water. So it looks like this, guys, look. Goes like this, shot into the water, and then it's like a Nerf gun. So it's going to pop back up. It's something that floats, okay? So it's an upside down. Well, that's the shape, at least right there, okay? It's not an upside down parabola, but that's going to be the shape right there. So if it's in the water, what do you know about the height? Well, height is a 0. That's y equals 0 is right there. So if it's below 0, that means it's negative or less than 0. So I'm just going to go t to the third minus t to the second minus 6t is less than 0. The height, that's the y, that's this stuff, is less than 0. So this is actually critical numbers type 1. It's not type 2 because I don't have a fraction. So step 1, get a 0, done. Step 2, factor. So I'm going to take out a t, and I'm left with t to the second minus t minus 6 is less than 0. Continue factoring, so it goes to t and t. The 6 goes to a 3 and a 2. Signs are different. Biggest is the negative. Looks like that. Next step, critical numbers. So your critical numbers are t equals 0, t equals negative 2, t equals positive 3. So then you go to your number line. No restrictions because it's not a type 2. Negative 2, 0, and 3. There's no equal sign, so they're all open. And then I love to interact with you guys and ask you right now, like, talk to me about this number line and these values. And just look at it and think about it. And does anybody notice anything? So hopefully someone notices that all those things right here don't even make sense because we're talking about time, and negative time doesn't make sense. So right here I'm going to say invalid solutions. So I'm really only looking to the right of the 0, which means I really only have 2 regions to test, okay? So I'm going to test between a 0 and a 3, and I'm going to test beyond a 3. I know my signs will alternate because all my exponents are 1s. So between 0 and 3 would be like a 1, and I'm going to put it right there. So everybody go 1 store, enter, memvar, enter, raise it to the third, minus memvar, enter, x squared, minus 6, memvar, enter, enter, and I got a negative. So at the very beginning, we knew that it's in the water. And then I know they're going to alternate, so that's a positive. So find the time when it's less than 0, that would be here. Now, if I write my answer like this, that doesn't make sense. Like, what in the heck does that mean? This is a word problem. So the 0 and the t again stand for t, which is time in seconds. So I'm going to say between 0 and 3 seconds after the rocket is shot. That's it. Okay? All right, example 4. So if this is on your midterm or whatever, quiz 2, final, it's a home run. It's so simple because literally you just take the first step. So look, guys, that's a critical numbers type 2. What's the first step? To get a 0 on the right-hand side. So literally, this is the result of the first step. 4x minus 2 minus 5 over x is less than 0. That is your answer. Super easy. Okay, question 5. So question 5, I have seen often, recently. So I do think you'll have one like question 5. So here's your rational expressions. They've given you the critical numbers and they want you to graph it. So basically, it's just a critical numbers type 2, only they did all the work for you. They did, well, not all of it, but they did a ton of the work, because they already told you the critical numbers. Now, you guys are smart. You didn't really need that. You could have done this by yourself. You absolutely do not have to do what I'm showing you. I'm just trying to show you what they did so you understand. So step number 1, get a 0, done. Step number 2, common denominator, not a thing. Step number 3, factor. So the bottom goes to x and x. The 6 goes to a 3 and a 2. Signs are different. Biggest is the negative. Looks like that. Set the top equal to 0, and you get x equals 1/2. Set the bottom equal to 0, you get -2, and you also get a +3. Well, they already did all that for you. So literally, I didn't have to do any of that. So all I'm going to do is come over here. They're not going to give you wrong numbers, so you don't have to worry about checking it or anything. -2 is here. 1/2 is here. +3 is here. I do have an equal sign. The 1/2 is going to be a closed circle, but the 3 and the 2 come from the bottom, so they're going to be opened. I only have 3 critical numbers, nothing squared, so I know my signs are going to alternate, okay? Now, can I really figure out that nothing squared without taking this step? You really can, because look, you can see that this guy's not squared. And this is a squared, ends up giving me 2 solutions. So I know neither one of those is raised to the second, because I can only have 2. So if one of them was raised to the second, then what about the other guy? Like, is he raised to the 0? Because I can only have an exponent of 2. So no, I know it's not a 0. I know it's 1 and 1. So I know that the signs are going to alternate, okay? If that doesn't make sense to you, just test all the regions, and it's fine. It's going to take you like an extra, 30 seconds or something. Okay, the place I'm going to plug it in, when I plug it in, is going to be right here. Be so careful about where to put parentheses, and that would be top and bottom. So if I go -3, -3, store, enter, parenthesis, 2, membar, enter, -1, close it, divided by parenthesis, membar, enter, x squared, minus membar, enter, -6, close it, enter, negative. If you understood that nothing's squared, you could just go negative, positive, negative, positive. If you wanted to, you could just test regions. So plug in a 0, plug in like a 1, plug in like a 4. It'll take you, 45 seconds. Less than 0 means negative. So that would be here and here. Now look what they said. Graph it on a number line. Guess what? Your number line is your answer. So that's it. If they did ask you, don't write it in interval form if they don't ask you. But the interval form, if it just says solve, you have to go all the way and write it. But it just says graph it, you're done. If you did write it in interval, -infinity, -2 with the parenthesis, union, bracket, 1/2 with the bracket, to 3 with the parenthesis, and that's how you write it in interval form. Okay, so that's your whole lesson, you guys. So what I want you to do now is to work on your quiz corrections. So if you look over in your folder for your particular period, your test 1 corrections are there. Go grab them, work on them, put them back. Make sure you don't take them out of the room. Okay, see you guys.